Heathenry is a modern pagan new religious movement that has been active in the United States since at least the early 1970s. Although the term heathenry is often employed to cover the entire religious movement, different heathen groups within the United States often prefer the term Ásatrú or Odinism as self-designations. Heathenry appeared in the United States during the 1960s, at the same time as the wider emergence of modern paganism in the United States. Among the earliest American group was the Odinist Fellowship, founded by Danish migrant Else Christensen in 1969. History. Ásatrú grew steadily in the United States during the 1960s. In 1969, the Danish Odinist Else Christensen established the Odinist Fellowship from her home in Florida, USA. Heavily influenced by Alexander Rudd Mill's writings, she began publication of a magazine, The Odinist. Although this focused to a greater extent on right-wing and racialist ideas than theological ones, Stephen McNallen first founded the Viking Brotherhood in the early 1970s, before creating the Ásatrú Free Assembly, AFA, in 1976, which broke up in 1986 amid widespread political disagreements after McNallen's repudiation of neo-Nazis within the group. In the 1990s, McNallen founded the Ásatrú Folk Assembly, AFA, an ethnically oriented heathen group headquartered in California. Meanwhile, Valgard Murray and his kindred in Arizona founded the Ásatrú Alliance, AA, in the late 1980s, which shared the AFA's perspectives on race and which published the Vátrú newsletter. In 1987, Edred Thorson and James Chisholm founded the Troth, which was incorporated in Texas. Taking an inclusive, non-racialist view, it soon grew into an international organization. Terminology. In English usage, the genitive Ásatrúa of AESIR faith is often used on its own to denote adherents, both singular and plural. This term is favored by practitioners who focus on the deities of Scandinavia, although it is problematic as many Ásatrúa worship deities and entities other than the AESIR, such as the Vanir, Valkyries, elves, and dwarves. Other practitioners term their religion Vanatrú, meaning those who honor the Vanir, or Ásatrú, meaning those who honor the goddesses, depending on the particular theological emphasis. Within the community, it is sometimes stated that the term Ásatrú pertains to groups which are not racially focused, while Odinism is the term preferred by racially oriented groups. However, in practice, there is no such neat division in terminology. There are notable differences of emphasis between Ásatrú as practiced in the US and in Scandinavia. According to Stremiska and Sigurvinsson, 2005, American Ásatrúa tend to prefer a more devotional form of worship and a more emotional conception of the Nordic gods than Scandinavian practitioners, reflecting the parallel tendency of highly emotional forms of Christianity prevalent in the United States. Demographics. Although deeming it impossible to calculate the exact size of the heathen community in the U.S., sociologist Jeffrey Kaplan estimated that, in the mid-1990s, there were around 500 active practitioners in the country, with a further 1,000 individuals on the periphery of the movement. He noted that the overwhelming majority of individuals in the movement were white, male, and young. Most had at least an undergraduate degree, and worked in a mix of white-collar and blue-collar jobs. From her experience within the community, Snook concurred that the majority of American heathens were male, adding also that most were also white and middle-aged, but believed that there had been a growth in the proportion of heathen women in the U.S. since the mid-1990s. The Pagan census project led by Helen A. Berger, Evan A. Leach, and Lee S. Schaffer gained 60 responses from heathens in the U.S., noting that 65% were male and 35% female, which they saw as the opposite of the rest of the country's pagan community. The majority had a college education, but were generally less well-educated than the wider pagan community, with a lower median income than the wider pagan community too. Subsequent assessments have suggested a larger support base, 10,000 to 20,000 according to McNallen, and 7,878 according to the 2014 census. Politics and controversies. Ásatrú organizations have memberships which span the entire political and spiritual spectrum. There is a history of political controversy within organized U.S. Ásatrú, mostly surrounding the question of how to deal with such adherents as placed themselves in a context of the far right and white supremacy, notably resulting in the fragmentation of the Ásatrú Free Assembly in 1986. Externally, political activity on the part of Ásatrú organizations has surrounded campaigns against alleged religious discrimination, such as the call for the introduction of an Ásatrú emblem of belief by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs to parallel the Wiccan pentacle granted to the widow of Patrick Stewart in 2006. In May 2013, the Hammer of Thor was added to the list of United States Department of Veterans Affairs emblems for headstones and markers. Folkish Ásatrú, universalism and racialism. Historically, the main dispute between the national organizations has generally centered on the interpretation of Nordic heritage as either something cultural or as something genetic or racial. In the internal discourse within American Ásatrú, this cultural, racial divide has long been known as universalist versus folkish Ásatrú. The Troth takes the universalist position, claiming Ásatrú as a synonym for Northern European heathenry, taken to comprise many variations, names, and practices, including Theodism, Erminism, Odinism, and Anglo-Saxon heathenry. The Ásatrú Folk Assembly takes the folkish position, claiming that Ásatrú and the Germanic beliefs are ancestral in nature, and as an indigenous religion of the European folk should only be accessed by the descendants of Europe. In the UK, Germanic neo-paganism is more commonly known as Odinism or as heathenry. This is mostly a matter of terminology, and US Ásatrú may be equated with UK Odinism for practical purposes, as is evident in the short-lived International Ásatrú-Odinist alliance of folkish Ásatrú Odinist groups. Some groups identifying as Ásatrú have been associated with National Socialist and white nationalist movements. Votandsfolk, for example, is an explicitly racial form. More recently, however, many Ásatrú groups have been taking a harder stance against these elements of their community. Declaration 127, surnamed for the corresponding stanza of the Heathen. When you see misdeeds, speak out against them, and give your enemies no frith, is a collective statement denouncing and testifying disassociation with the Ásatrú Folk Assembly for alleged racial and sexually discriminatory practices and beliefs. Signed by lesbians from over 150 Ásatrú religious organizations from over 15 different nations, mainly represented on Facebook. Discrimination charges. Inmates of the Intensive Management Unit at Washington State Penitentiary who are adherents of Ásatrú in 2001 were deprived of their Thor's Hammer medallions. In 2007, a federal judge confirmed that Ásatrú adherents in U.S. prisons have the right to possess a Thor's Hammer pendant. An inmate sued the Virginia Department of Corrections after he was denied it while members of Other religions were allowed their medallions. In the Georgia Karakos v. Watts case, Peter N. Georgia Karakos filed a pro se civil rights complaint in the United States District Court for the District of Colorado against 19 prison officials for interference with the free exercise of his Ásatrú religion, and discrimination on the basis of his being Ásatrú. See also Germanic Neo-Paganism, Heathen holidays, Neo-Paganism in German-speaking Europe, Ásatrú Archaeology, Neo-Paganism in the United Kingdom, Heathenry in Canada, Norse mythology, polytheistic reconstructionism, Odinism. Footnotes. Sources: Paulus, Rick. How a Thor worshipping religion turned racist. Vice magazine. May 1, 2015. Ásatrú. Germanic paganism. Religion facts. Ásatrú. Norse heathenism. Alt religion. Ásatrú. Norse heathenism. Religious tolerance. Jotun's Bane kindred. Ravencast, the only Ásatrú podcast. Interviews and 101 information. Theodish belief. General information about theodism. Ásatrú. Organizations at Curlie. Based on DMOZ. On the development of Ásatrú in Australia, see John A. Asbjorn. 1999. Skegold. Skelmold. Vindold. Vergold, Alexander Rudd Mills and the Ásatrú Faith in the New Age. Australian Religion Studies Review. University of Sydney. 12. 77–83. Retrieved 30 October 2015.